This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, July 6th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate your staying with us on Africa 54. Tensions are rising in Ethiopia as the government says more than 166 people were killed during anti-government protests last week. Addis Ababa and other hotspots are being closely guarded by security forces as an internet shutdown entered its sixth day. Large protests erupted in the capital and spread to the surrounding Oromia region after popular Oromo musician Haacaaluu Hundeessaa was shot and killed by unknown gunmen. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has called his killing an evil act. Hundeessa's death tapped into grievances fueled by decades of government repression and what the Oromo describe as their historic exclusion from political power. The unrest is the deadliest since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who is Oromo, took power in 2018 with the promise of wide-ranging reforms. 7 government soldiers are dead following an ambush in central Mali where at least 32 villagers had been killed by suspected jihadists, according to authorities. The Defense Ministry says the attack on an army patrol took place Thursday just outside of Gwari village in the Mopti region. Suspected Islamist militants had raided the villages of Gwari, Jindo, and Fangadugu last Wednesday. The southern United States is being slammed by an unrelenting surge in COVID-19 infections and has recorded more than 50,000 new coronavirus cases in recent days. Florida recorded more than 11,000 new cases on Saturday, a new single-day high. In Harris County, Texas, the greater Houston area recorded almost 25% of its total of 35,000 coronavirus cases on Saturday. U.S. President Donald Trump, in a speech at a White House party Saturday night, said, quote, 99% of the new cases are totally harmless. In all, about 130,000 Americans have been killed by the virus, but younger people being infected now are generally recovering. Nearly 3 million Americans have been infected with the coronavirus. Now to Africa, where Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo is self-isolating for 14 days on the advice of doctors after a person in his inner circle tested positive for coronavirus, according to a statement released by the government. Akufo-Addo has tested negative, but is self-quarantining out of an abundance of caution. Ghana has recorded almost 20,000 coronavirus cases, one of the highest number of cases in sub-Saharan Africa, with at least 117 deaths, according to Reuters. And new Malawi President Lazarus Chakwera has ordered that Monday's inauguration ceremony be scaled down amid a surge of coronavirus cases. COVID-19 cases in Malawi have more than doubled in the past 2 weeks to reach nearly 1,500, with 16 deaths. In Narobi's Kibera neighborhood, those who depend on day-to-day wages are being hit hardest by the economic effects of the coronavirus pandemic. While Kenya's government is providing some support, a local charity has formed to pick up the slack. The Adopt a Family campaign connects well-off Kenyan families with those less fortunate during the COVID-19 outbreak. So far, the initiative has connected more than 400 families. Raul Ombuo has our report from Nairobi.
3 months ago, 43-year-old Annette Okumu, a mother of 6, was running a cake-making business on a busy street in Nairobi, and her husband had regular work as a painter. Then Kenya's Minister of Health announced the country's first coronavirus case. Less than a week later, no one was buying cakes from Okumu, and her husband stopped getting jobs. Okumu's child, born with sickle cell anemia, started to get sick after several days of not taking medication.
At this time, there's no food, there's no breakfast, no lunch, no supper. For 2 days, I wondered, what next? Am I going to lose my kid? So when I saw Adopt a Family, it was late at night, through social media. That is when I decided enough is enough. Let me speak out.
Annette called the number on the Adopt a Family Facebook page. Moses Omondi picked up the late-night call and asked Annette to meet him the next day.
The idea, Adopt a Family as an initiative, basically started towards the end of March, when the government had issued the directive of stay-at-home, social distancing, and avoiding physical contact. Basically, it led to many of the employees, closing shop in order to adhere to the directives. In the process, there are people who are relying from hand to mouth, these to manual laborers and stuff. Most of them lost their jobs. I sat and thought, what can I do that can adhere to the government directives? That's when I thought, why don't I look for families who can support a family?
On the night that Annette Okumu made a call to Omondi, Joe Bitange, a video editor in Narobi, was on his phone reading about the Adopt a Family initiative. Bitange reached out to Omondi the following morning and was connected to Annette Okumu. Soon, Okumu's family had their first meal in 2 days.
I decided to support one family by giving them a voucher. And he told me that the voucher that I gave him was actually supposed to support the family, to feed the family for 1 week. Yeah, so come the second week, I also gave him another voucher. And very many people now came in because they knew I was part of the program, because I was among the first people who joined his team.
In less than 3 months, the initiative has connected 460 families from the slum to another 460 families who give them financial support. In early March, following a stampede in Kibera that killed 2 people, the government said it would pilot a cash transfer program to help the most vulnerable members of society buy food during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many Kibera residents say they have not received that cash, however. Government representatives in Kibera say they are doing their best to help the needy during this time, and that personal initiatives such as Omondi's are important in filling gaps.
And the government also came up with the vulnerable persons in the community who get some support from the government itself, the aged, the orphans, the widows, and others, the bedridden. So far, the government has done very well. But you see, you cannot do it alone. You need partners. And this is why we say the likes of Omondi are the best in the world.
Apart from direct money transfers, Adopt a Family conducts food distribution drives for needy families. They also run a feeding program for children in the slum where Annette volunteers her time cooking. Rael Umbor for VOA News, Nairobi.
Kenya, in addition to battling COVID-19, is facing another outbreak, teenage pregnancies. During 3 months of lockdown, 152,000 Kenyan teenage girls became pregnant. That's a 40% increase in the monthly average. Mohammed Yusuf reports from Nairobi.
Tabitha Mukui, 45, lives in a remote village in Machakos County, eastern Kenya. Her teenage daughter is one of more than 150,000 young girls who have become pregnant since Kenya announced its first COVID case in March. Mukui discovered the pregnancy just last week after her daughter wore a sweater for many days.
I asked her to remove her sweater, and she removed the sweater. I looked at her and saw that she was pregnant. I felt so angry inside, but I did not beat her. I did not yell at her.
Rafael Chengo, local chief in the area, says he usually deals with 1 or 2 pregnancy cases in a year.
In these 3 months, I have received and directly dealt with 4 cases.
This Center for Vulnerable Boys and Girls have received 41 children since March, 18 of them girls.
Defilement cases was a major factor there among the group. We have also 3 cases of orphaned children, and the rest of the group to seek protection. We found that they are not safe in places where they used to reside before.
Agencies say at least 150,000 girls have become pregnant in the last 3 months, a 40% increase from last year. Machakos County recorded 4,000 cases in the past 3 months. Kate Maina Voli, the country director for Plan International in Kenya, says the COVID-19 pandemic is taking away the gains made in empowering girls.
It's shone a light on the ugly face of gender-based violence and the atrocities that are committed on girls in Kenya. It has shone a light on the gender disparities, and we now run the risk of eroding all the gains we've had in terms of advancing equality for girls.
As for Mukui, she says she has accepted the situation with her daughter and is ready to support her daughter when she is ready to finish her education. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Matu, Kenya.
The United States is continuing to experience dramatic increases in COVID-19 infections. The U.S. state of Florida saw over 11,000 new cases on July 4th, a single-day record. As VOA's Ken Faribault reports, mayors in cities dealing with crowded hospitals and soaring infection rates are raising the alarm about the lack of concern among the population to curb the spread of coronavirus.
Pubs in Britain welcomed customers for the first time after months of lockdown due to the coronavirus. But in the U.S., the mayor of Phoenix in the state of Arizona says businesses in her city opened too early.
We had crowded nightclubs handing out free champagne, no masks. Our 20 to 44-year-olds, which is my own demographic, really led the explosion, and we've seen such growth in that area. We're seeing a lot of people go to large family gatherings and infect their family members. We are in a crisis related to testing.
Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami, Florida, is also dealing with a surge of new COVID-19 cases in his city.
But there's no doubt that the fact that when we reopened, people started socializing as if the virus didn't exist.
The concerns come as the United States celebrated the July 4th Independence Day, which saw long lines of cars waiting to get to beaches in some areas and crowds gathering to watch fireworks in others, including the National Mall in Washington, D.C., where President Trump spoke, downplaying the threat of the coronavirus, which has killed nearly 130,000 Americans.
But now we have tested almost 40 million people. By so doing, we show cases, 99% of which are totally harmless.
The president also addressed the urgency of finding a vaccine.
We are unleashing our nation's scientific brilliance, and will likely have a therapeutic and/or vaccine solution long before the end of the year.
But the administrator of the Food and Drug Administration, Stephen Hahn, distanced his agency from that commitment.
I can't predict when a vaccine will be available, and I just want to tell you about FDA's role in this. Yes, we are seeing unprecedented speed for the development of a vaccine.
Hahn also emphasized measures that can curb the spread of the coronavirus before a vaccine is available.
This is a very rapidly moving epidemic, a rapidly moving pandemic, and any death, any case is tragic. And we want to do everything we can to prevent that. What I would say to the American people is follow the guidance of the CDC, follow the protocols of the local and state governments, wear a mask if you can't socially distance, or if the local procedure is to wear a mask at all times, socially distant, hand sanitation, and protect the vulnerable. That's how we're going to get out of this.
To date, the United States has recorded about 2.8 million cases of COVID-19 and is currently the country with the highest number of infections and deaths in the world. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, South African golfers display their skills for fun, honor, and charity despite COVID-19 related cancellations. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Lynn Ormoudou, your VOA Health correspondent. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says there are currently no drugs licensed for the treatment or prevention of COVID-19, and there is no proof that hydroxychloroquine or any other drug can cure or prevent coronavirus. The misuse of hydroxychloroquine can cause serious side effects, illness, and even lead to death. For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Welcome back to Africa 54. This month in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as millions of Congolese celebrate the 60th anniversary of independence from Belgium, they are also celebrating the fall of one of the most prominent symbols of the colonization and plunder of their country, King Leopold II. Inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement in America, protesters in Belgian cities have toppled several statues depicting King Leopold, whose violent administration over the Congo Free State is responsible for the death of an estimated 10 million people. Last week, Belgium's King Philippe sent his deepest regrets to the president of the DRC for the suffering and humiliation his nation inflicted while it colonized the region. Professor Adam Hochschild is the author of the critically acclaimed book, King Leopold's Ghost. VOA's Jackson Vunganyi spoke to him about how Leopold took interest in Congo.
Leopold wanted some part of the world where he could reign supreme and where he could make a lot of money. And he got in right at the beginning of what's often talked about as the European scramble for Africa, where the major countries in Europe competed with each other to grab portions of the African continent. And it's amazing how much they grabbed in such a short time. In 1870, 80% of the African continent was under the rule of indigenous kings, chiefs, leaders of one sort or another. By 35 years later, virtually all of it was either white settler colonies like South Africa, run by their white settlers, or it was European colonies or so-called protectorates of one sort or another.
Not the country of Belgium or the kingdom of Belgium, but for him as a king, personally, it was his personal.
It was his personal possession, and he talked about himself as its proprietor. And it was more than 70 times the size of Belgium. It remained in his personal possession for 23 years. And then in 1908, a year before he died, it became the Belgian Congo. But up to that point, it belonged to him personally, and he made an enormous fortune from it during that time, chiefly by developing a forced labor system to gather what was then the territory's most lucrative commodity, which was wild rubber. And basically, his soldiers would go into village after village, would hold the women hostage in order to force the men of each village to go deep into the rainforest for days and eventually weeks out of each month and gather a monthly quota of wild rubber. And you can actually see photographs of these women hostages in chains.
What was happening in the world at the time? What was driving the need for this rubber?
Good question. It really began in 1887 when, for the first time, they invented the inflatable bicycle tire. And then suddenly there was a big demand for rubber for bicycle tires, and very soon after that for automobiles, which really began in the 1890s. There was also a big market for rubber in industrial uses of all kinds, belts, rubber belts in factories, rubber coatings on the telegraph and telephone wires, which were spreading all over the world. So there was a huge market for rubber. But in order to plant a plantation of rubber trees, have them grow to maturity where you can begin harvesting rubber from them, that takes about 15 years. So the people who could really make a killing were people like Leopold, who had sections of the African rainforest where rubber grew wild, not as trees, but as vines, which twined around palm trees or other trees up to where they could get some sunlight.
Were there other countries interested in that region? Did they ever have to fight with him for potentially with this, vast wealth that he was controlling?
Well, when Leopold got his hands on the territory and got, as I mentioned, the US and all the other major countries to recognize it as his own, it was before they had discovered that rubber was really the valuable commodity there. That came a few years later. At the time, they were thinking mainly about ivory. Other countries also seized colonies in the region: Britain, France, Germany, Portugal. And those that had wild rubber, which were not the British colonies, but the French and German colonies and part of the Portuguese colony of Angola, they saw how much money Leopold was making by this system of forced labor. And within 5 or 10 years, all of them adopted it also, with the similar very high death rate that existed in the country.
They instituted the same policies of torture and plunder that Leopold was using in the Congo too.
Exactly, the same business of holding the women hostage in order to turn the men into forced laborers. And you needed hostages to do that. You couldn't just chain people up and send them into the rainforest to gather rubber, because these wild rubber vines were scattered very widely. And when those near a village got tapped dry, the men might have to walk miles and miles to find other rubber vines that they could draw the rubber out.
VOA's Jackson Vunganyi speaking with Professor Adam Hochschild, author of the critically acclaimed book, King Leopold's Ghost. U.S. President Donald Trump spent the 4th of July weekend at Independence Day celebrations in South Dakota and Washington. He used both events to deliver a strong message on law and order, the platform that his campaign is focusing on ahead of the November election. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara traveled with the president to South Dakota and has this report.
A celebration of America's independence above Mount Rushmore, in front of a crowd of thousands, most not wearing masks. President Donald Trump delivered a dark and somber speech presenting a re-election campaign platform focused on law and order to rally his supporters against what he calls the new far-left fascism.
We will expose this dangerous movement, protect our nation's children, end this radical assault, and preserve our beloved American way of life.
Trump's visit to this giant monument of past American presidents came after months of Black Lives Matter protests, and as his administration clamped down on protesters who want to remove statues of figures who supported slavery and white supremacy. He delivered a strong rebuke of what he called the cancel culture against the country's heritage.
This monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. Their legacy will never, ever be destroyed. Their achievements will never be forgotten. And Mount Rushmore will stand forever as an eternal tribute to our forefathers and to our freedom.
So the fact that he's going to Mount Rushmore is basically trying to say to his base audience, hey, if you don't like what's happening with all these monuments, I'm going to go to the biggest and most immovable monument there is, and I'm going to claim it as my own.
In a speech that some have called divisive, Trump incites the country towards totalitarianism.
We will not be tyrannized, we will not be demeaned, and we will not be intimidated by bad, evil people.
The us versus them speech came as Trump trails in political surveys, further behind his Democratic campaign rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, nationally, in key battleground states, and even in traditionally conservative strongholds like Missouri and Texas.
Right now, his campaign is a dumpster fire. And I say that not just because of the polls, but because there are Republicans who are vocally opposed to him.
A National Pew Research poll shows Trump 10 percentage points behind Biden. In 2016, Trump managed to beat Hillary Clinton despite her lead in the polls.
There's still a lot of time between now and the election, and 2020, if anything, has shown itself to be a rather tumultuous year. But at present, the president certainly, I think, has a lot to worry about, and it looks like an uphill climb for him.
As new coronavirus cases surpass 50,000 daily, and despite health officials urging Americans to scale back 4th of July celebrations this year, Trump also held a Salute to America event at the White House. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
In our sports news, the U.S. professional golf tournaments have restarted, but for professional players and fans of pro golf in Southern Africa, real-life tournaments are still on hold. Despite COVID-19 related cancellations, players are still finding ways to show off their skills for fun, honor, charity, and even money. Marisa de Klerk has more from Johannesburg.
For the first 3 weeks, I was a motivational speaker, a gym instructor, everything possible.
Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic, professional golfers on Southern Africa's Sunshine Tour like Heinrich Bruiners have been moving their game onto the cyber greens of the newly created Virtual Sunshine Tour. Bruiners, the runner-up in the VST's first tournament for prize money, says lockdown boredom was his motivation for agreeing to be a player in the very first VST match.
I've had so many people that send me messages like, Heini, you're such a cool guy, you're so much fun, and being a professional golfer, to have the extra exposure, it's been awesome.
The Virtual Sunshine Tour aims to keep professional players competitive while making Southern African golf exciting and relevant. Reaching at least 600,000 people globally, the virtual tour has taken professional golf in South Africa to a new level in the post-COVID-19 lockdown world, says Sunshine Tour Deputy Director Thomas Abt.
It just makes golf relevant in spaces where people may not have been interested in golf. We know that we're appealing to a completely different market. When our golf season starts normally, we want those followers to convert into coming onto the golf course. So this is going to be an extension of what we've got, but also a promotional platform.
It's the hope that this online initiative by the Sunshine Tour and another by the European Tour will help speed up golf's ventures into digital media with increased fan interaction, says international freelance golf writer and sports journalist Ken Borland.
It's the younger generation of golfers who are more open to this idea. So, I think, especially in TV coverage, we're already seeing it.
Courses are slowly reopening, observing strict anti-coronavirus measures. The VST seems as if it's here to stay, and it's teasing a new look. So far, only one real competition, the European Tour's Nedbank Golf Challenge, has been rescheduled for December. Marisa de Klerk for VOA News, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.